Okay, welcome everybody to this session. We're into the last few sessions now of the afternoon. After this one we have an interview with Marta Salogni, fantastic engineer and producer based in London, and then following that we have an interview with James Lavelle, founder of the Mowax label. But now we're delighted to welcome a real innovator in the field of live presentation and live visuals. And any of you who saw Kendrick Lamar's performance at AYA last year, and before that there was we had Flying Lotus here a year or two before that. This kind of incredible immersive visual presentations accompanying those performances were created by our guest here today, who is John King from LA, aka Timeboy, who has been working kind of linked in a way to the Brainfeeder label and Circle of Artists over there, and he's done visuals for Flying Lotus, Thundercat, Lamar, like I mentioned, Erykah Badu, The Weeknd, DJ Snake, and many, many others that I'm sure you will hear and see some examples of. Great to have you here, John, thank you. And he'll be talking with Kyrre Heldal Karlsen, who's a Norwegian lighting designer and innovator in that field here. He's done a lot of work in various theatre projects, music projects with some of Norway's great kind of jazz and experimental musicians. He's done work in various cathedrals around the country. He's also filling the world of live music with some fantastic visual impressions. So please enjoy losing yourselves in the visual wonderland of Timeboy.
I'm so extremely thrilled to have you here, John. It's like about time. I mean, we met like once or twice at the Air Festival. Felt like it was just like a super nice vibe there right away, and it made me so curious to hear, like, you know, what do you do, dude? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because I mean, you know, we already got your whole resume here, or I mean, you know, some parts of it, and it's impressive.
yeah, thank you. First off, it's really a pleasure to be here. It's so cool. I think what I do, there's not often the opportunity to kind of dive into the flow, the workflow. So having that opportunity here is really special to me. So yeah, thank you for bringing me out here.
Thanks for coming out.
Yeah.
I like to keep things like a little bit open, so if people have any questions, comments from the house, feel free to like raise your hands or raise your voice at any time, and we'll try and keep it loose.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to get an idea, with, like we talked about earlier, just to kind of scope what everyone does here. Just out of curiosity, are people here from the music business, or from like a background in visual art or lighting? How to do that?
Let's do a hands up, guys. Who's like a music business professional in the room? So that's like about 2/3, I would say, half 2/3. Who like works in visuals, lights, that kind of field? Okay, cool.
Are there any VJs out here by any chance? Anyone who does live video art? Is there one right there? Awesome.
Cool. Sweet.
Yeah, good to know.
So, I mean, I've been following your work for a while, and you really first caught my attention with the whole Flying Lotus setup. Could you just like quickly bring us up to speed on what that was about? Your whole like double screen 3D
Yeah,
thing?
sure.
That's kind of one we'll go for there.
That's what opened up the doorway to all the other possibilities that I've done. It all started working with Flying Lotus. Back in 2012, I started working with him professionally, and it all started by doing like a simple video animation reel that I'd love to actually play, just to kind of
go for it. We're going to be showing a lot of examples here, so
yeah.
You know, bring your phones out, kind of.
Okay.
yeah, we're going to be covering quite a few different examples of John's work. And we're also going to be covering like how he approaches the whole logistic process, how he deals with clients, you know, how he attacks this whole concept of like visual stage design. Because it's something that's become extremely important over the last few years, where all of a sudden, you know, every band playing live need to have like a super impressive stage concept. And there's one. Yeah.
My entire career started with learning how to do concept designs in Cinema 4D. Cinema 4D was the absolute, the best programming that I've ever learned, and the most useful. You know, being able to not only do like stage design, but also being able to do content creation. And I first wanted to learn how to do Cinema 4D, but I wasn't 100% trained to use it. So making these stage designs was kind of a crash course in learning Cinema 4D back in 2012. And the whole function, the whole reason was I wanted to illustrate some different ideas to Flying Lotus about some different ways of approaching stage design, and in particular different ways of being able to make a stage design that would break down quite easily, that you could fit in some flight cases. Mm-hmm. So I learned Cinema 4D in a few weeks by taking YouTube tutorials. And I made this animation and I sent this to him. And this is, you know, he was really interested in some of the ideas, and because of this, we ended up doing a show called Layer 3, which was in mid-2012. It was, the idea of Layer 3 was using two screens, a transparent screen in the front and a rear projection screen. And that show was really great. It opened up some interesting doors because it was a very simple idea. It was literally two screens with Flying Lotus in the center, and the whole idea is he's immersed between the two layers of visuals. And it was a show we were able to do for, I think, 4 or 5 years. Nice, because you could, when all you had to do was pretty much create new visuals, and it felt like a brand new show. Right. You know, so this opened up that door to creating the visual work for Flying Lotus. Right. And that kind of led to a little. I'll just, I guess, take you guys through some other stuff. A few years later, I did this visual design that we call the Hypercube, which I'm not too sure if anyone here saw it, but we took this on the road all around the world. And this was another design that I did in Cinema 4D. So starting off with Flying Lotus is what opened up the door to creating stage design and doing most of my work in Cinema 4D, you know, creating the concepts, figuring out what I want to do, and then making concept animations. And I guess I could kind of maybe take you through a few of the different concept animations.
Yeah, it would be cool if you can also show, if you have some footage on the what's it called, layer 3.
Mm-hmm. Yep, sure.
Yeah, cool. Because I mean, you know, you talk about it as if it's a very simple design,
mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
sure.
you know, in principle it is. But it was also like one of those ideas that, you know, when it comes to impact, there's nothing simple about it.
Yeah. It was. It's an interesting idea. The transparent material on the front is a type of material called scrim, which has been around for 100 years. So the idea of projecting onto scrim when you pull the lights down, it's kind of like a hologram. It's a really actually a wonderful effect, even though it's kind of an old school technology.
Totally.
You know, you can project onto it, and when the lights are down, you create these hologram effects, and you can use it for projection mapping. So yeah, this was a show using this type of material called scrim. This was the Hypercube show that we did. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. The way that you can do kind of this reveal, you know, with controlling light. You know, you could do this, project onto the material and completely cover up the Flying Lotus, and then you can reveal him. So it's a very playful material, but it opened up a lot of doors, and you never get tired of kind of watching a show with scrim, because it literally, when the lights are down, it literally looks like a hologram. You know, the visuals that are floating in space. So yeah, it's one of those shows that we've been able to constantly do, and it still feels fresh. you know.
I have to say though, I mean, again, I know also from talking about my own work, I know that it's very easy to talk about stuff as being super simple, but you are adding a couple of touches here that I want to point out to the audience. Like for instance, those little LED bars on the sides, they really bring everything together and bring everything out. And you also have some lights pointing in on Mr. Flying Lotus himself to also be able to, like, you know, bring him out and hide him again, you know. So there's some skill to this.
Yeah, it's definitely an art form. And it all goes back to designing everything in Cinema 4D first.
Right.
You know, everything that I do is all designed to scale in 3D space, where I can figure out all the different mechanics of what it takes to do a stage design in 3D. You know, I can do a lot of problem solving in 3D first.
Right.
And that's my go-to method. Is everything is done in Cinema 4D in 3D, whether it's just the concept stills or animations, and some of the animations actually go pretty far into the world of ambition, you know. But I think that's really important to be able to be a bit abstract and then kind of pull yourself back. But starting at places that are really abstract, I think, is important to kind of get a larger idea of what the possibilities are.
Right.
In fact, I'd love to play a few animations that I made in Cinema 4D that are a bit more abstract.
Absolutely,
That would
keep it going. Cool.
So,
Love to see that.
so I like to, well, I guess I'll kind of let it speak for itself and I'll explain after. So,
This is something that you haven't realized yet, right?
I haven't realized this yet, but I think it's really important to be able to explore the impossibilities. So yeah, this one utilized 6 different motorized slip discs that would spin 6 separate LED display surfaces, double-sided, so there'd be content on the front and the back with yeah, it's pretty crazy shit.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. This actually was going to be for DJ Snake for the 2017 Coachella show.
Right.
He was interested in doing something that was really ambitious, and for some reason I was going through a phase in my life where I was really into gyroscopes.
Right.
And I always had this idea of, you know, how could you put a performer in the center of a gyroscope, you know, with all of these different layers that could rotate.
Right.
And I came up with this idea, and I didn't want it to just be this 3D concept design that couldn't be realized. You know, it had to be something that actually could be built. So I consulted some of the production companies that I worked really closely with back in LA, and asked them, you know, how could we make something like this? What would it take? What are the actual type of objects? So this design was based on real world product and different display technologies and different types of fabrication methods. So this is actually something that could be realized if they met the budget. It's very, 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 very expensive.
I'm sure. It looks it.
That was the main reason why we weren't able to actually make it happen. Is the price was like $400,000 or $500,000. You know, and for a show for Coachella, it's not viable unless you really want to go there.
Totally cool.
And here's another concept design that I did, kind of in that same world. This one utilized some robotic arms that a company that I work with in LA, they have about 6 of these robotic arms, like the same arms that build the Tesla cars. Right. They had a few of them for a project that they did with Google, and so they just have these robot arms laying around in their warehouse.
I mean, it's nice to have. Right?
It's nice, yeah. It's really nice to just like be able to have, but they weren't doing anything with it.
Wow.
So I had an idea of this idea of being able to tear apart the design of the stage. So basically, it was LED sticks. Connected to these robot arms, where you could kind of use the robot arms to take it apart and form different shapes out of it. And this one was a bit more practical. It wasn't in the hundreds of thousands. Well, it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but the lower hundreds instead of the mid hundreds.
Right.
So a little bit more practical but at the same time, it's still very expensive. A lot of custom work.
I love the reflections that happen on the bottom of those
the mirror
panels.
on the bottom.
Really
it's really cool.
Really confuses the whole geometry on the stage.
And with the reflection, you can kind of play with the way it transforms the optics of the stage. You know, being able to set it up in these different configurations. This type of stuff, it's so cool to be able to dream up of any possibility, even though it might be completely impractical. You know, just to be able to dream up the ideas opens up doors of what's possible or what you can do. You know, even though you may aim totally high in an unrealistic place, you'll be surprised that, like, you know, exploring these options opens up an idea that you never would have thought about unless you kind of went there. And that's what was really important for kind of this self-discovery. Even though I'm aiming really high with some of the concepts, it becomes, you know, nevertheless pretty fruitful when I want to design actually, you know, real-world type of things. So
how do you deal with that transition from like the virtual into the real world? Is it important for you that the final design that you present on stage, that it like looks more or less identical to what you made in a computer, or do you are you more loose about it? How do you approach that?
Yeah, in the beginning, it's a bit more loose, just because you want to explore an idea and a concept. And the way I make relationships with the artist or the client, I like to connect with them a little bit more personal. So even before I start a project, or even before I start fleshing out ideas, I'll kind of become friends with my client. You know, we will talk every day, talk about art, their inspirations, the music they made, the way, you know, growing up, like literally being able to kind of get to know who that person is before I even think of an idea. So I'll start off by developing some type of personal connection with an artist. And that is what instantly leads to ideas. You know, just by having normal conversations with a client, you know, if you get to know them on a more personal level, I think the ideas can kind of bubble up more naturally. They're not forced. It's just in a conversation, you'll start having ideas of different possibilities. And then, you know, of course, I'm kind of writing down little notes and thinking about stuff. Usually with me, just after a few conversations, I'll start forming an idea in my head of what could be a cool possibility. And then I'll explore in Cinema 4D. I'll create those initial ideas and possibilities. I've actually broken it apart into different phases, which I think is a really useful tool when you work with clients, to be able to kind of break apart the way you'll approach design work. And I took a little screenshot of how I do this with every artist. So here's a breakdown budget that I did for an artist, and you'll notice how it says phase 1, 2, and 3. I approach this for every artist that I work with. It's always the same. It's always the same thing. I'll start with phase 1, and I'll make this crystal clear. You know, they'll understand how I work. And phase 1 is always, you know, after I talk to the artist, get an idea of some ideas, like what, you know, something that we can explore. I'll let them know that, you know, phase 1 would be kind of running through some basic concept ideas, you know, making different types of stage designs in 3D, maybe 3 or 4 different options that are based on the conversations that we had. Maybe make some previs animations like what you guys saw with the other, like the abstract stage designs. And then after I present these ideas to the artist, they'll usually choose a few different, you know, they'll choose one of their favorites, and then we'll do phase 2, which is, you know, budget integration. It's like, okay, so now that they want this idea, I have to figure out how to actually build the show, you know, according to their budget and, you know, whatever resources that I have available. And phase 2 will usually include all the research and development, figuring it out, all the technical details on how to make it happen. And then when they're ready to go into the actual process of producing the show, I'll go into phase 3. And this is you know, in the industry, this would be considered kind of a low budget show. You know, the grand total is 10,000. And that would be from pretty much my responsibilities from the very beginning to the very end of being able to, you know, designing a show all the way to realizing the show. And these are the different processes. I guess to kind of take you through what phase 1 would look like, a show I did for an artist out of France named Chami. I'll show you the phase one.
Do you like develop new sketches for every client you work with?
Every client, yeah. Every client, there's a lot of different animations that I'll work on.
Right.
I spend most of my time in Cinema 4D doing the concept designs
Sounds
and
like
animations.
Yeah.
But then I'll spend half of my time actually directing the production. You know, so it's and then I'll spend the end of it on the road VJing or operating the lights. So yeah, I'm kind of there through the entire process from beginning to end.
Is that important for you? Can you imagine yourself like, you know, just churning out 3D animations and then sending someone else off to do the rest?
Yeah, wouldn't that be kind of strange? I guess it would be. It's definitely possible when you're working with a team and it's a really large project. You need to be working with other people. But I'm personally really used to doing kind of all of it myself or with a very small team. With content creation, when you go and reach out for animators, of course, you can have a big team of animators creating the actual content.
Right.
But when it comes to stage design, I'll usually be responsible for the whole process until I take the blueprint schematics and deliver it to the production company when they build it. You know, that'll be a whole team of people.
Obviously.
But I'm there from the beginning until the very end. You know, and like I said, I'm on tour with these artists, operating the videos and operating the lights.
Sounds like a total privilege to me.
What was that?
It sounds like that sounds like a real privilege to me to be able to do that, to be able to follow through with everything that you do.
Totally, yeah. It's nice being from beginning to end. You know, you feel this personal attachment to the whole show. You know, it's not like you're just creating some animations and then you're handing it over. You feel like I think a lot more passion gets injected into the project when you're there from beginning to end. And then that's how it's traditionally been for me and all the clients that I work with.
Right.
This was phase one of a DJ booth idea that I did. The artist Chami, he's really funny. He dresses up as like a Catholic priest when he performs live.
Right.
That's his.
I was wondering about that motive.
Yeah. So he originally wanted like a custom wooden type of altar on stage. And from my experience with using wood and seeing how it works on stage, to me it felt a bit like limited, you know, especially with light, trying to light up like a wooden type of. So I said, wouldn't it be cool if we had layers of acrylic plexiglass that we could kind of make this with like a LED display behind it, so you could kind of create these different light shapes and it would illuminate the entire altar DJ booth. And they loved the idea, so then I made 3 different options of stages, of altars, all of them using acrylic and different types of configurations, all inspired by doing like research on architecture, Gothic architecture. So everything was inspired by actual real architecture.
Right.
And the artist chose the one on the very right over there. That's the one that he liked. So for phase 2, I had to actually see if the idea was practical. You know, if really you could is it possible to use layers of acrylic and put a light behind it? You know, will that even work? Is it something that's even realistic? And so I went to a plexiglass company and I sent them some illustrations, and they made this for me, which was 6 layers of acrylic that I ended up taping together, and I was really happy that it actually worked. I put an LED panel behind it, and I think that one was it this right here? Yeah, I put, it's hard to see right now, but I put an LED panel behind it, and it lit up the way I kind of was hoping that it would. You know, the light would cascade through all of the layers of acrylic plexiglass. And,
beautiful work.
Yeah, it was just sending them like the pictures of the experiments. They were like, that's exactly what we want. You know, it's more than what we would even dream of. And it was great. I ended up going to a company, and we made it. And this was one of the, if I have it right here. Yeah, this was the test using the LED panel just to show you how it works.
Ooh.
And then this was like a little promo for the tour with the actual full-scale altered DJ booth. And it's been nice. They've used it now for, I think, the past 4 years. Almost every show they take it on the road. So it's a privilege to see this type of vision that started off 100% in animation. You know, I spent so much time in the 3D world making these designs, and then to be able to like walk on stage and see the thing that you've had in your mind, that you've had in 3D space, it never grows old. It's one of those feelings that's just so surreal and such a pleasure, you know. And that's one of the biggest nice, you know, side effects of doing design is being able to feel so privileged when you actually see them built on stage.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. One design that you did that really caught my imagination was the work that you did for 100 Waters. Could you show a little bit of that?
Yeah, that was a really cool one. That.
Because I mean, I've been following you on Instagram or whatever, and I started seeing these things that looked like, you know, a bunch of CDs hung somehow and like spinning with some video on it. It was kind of like abstract and absurd, the whole thing. Yeah. And then a couple of months later, I think you posted some stuff of the final product, and it's like, it just, you know, it just rules.
Yeah, that was definitely a project of passion, because the amount of work that it took to actually realize the idea was at times pretty overwhelming. But it was fun and extremely challenging. One of the weird things about what I do is there's oftentimes, by doing a concept design in 3D, when the artist wants to actually build it, I'll have to figure out a lot of different methods of how to approach this. You know, not all artists are able to afford a production company that'll charge 50, 60, 70,000 for a stage. Sometimes you have to go out and meet engineers or carpenters and work with them directly. And that's how I did it with this idea. So this band 100 Waters originally had an idea of, they wanted something like this. Or they had an idea of kind of like mirrors that could be at the very back of the stage, something that could reflect what they're doing, but they weren't too sure like how they wanted to do it. They just, you know, these were some visions and some ideas that they had, and but they didn't know what they wanted to do with it. And so after talking to them and kind of getting to know a little bit about them, I ended up doing a concept stage animation that illustrated some ideas of having mirrors and reflection and projection, and how to incorporate projection and reflection. So my idea was this, which was, it's kind of hard to see, but
I think that's the first post that I saw on Instagram.
This was, oh really? Yeah, this was really cool. So basically my idea was these mirror discs, and it would be a row of, like, I think 16 mirror discs attached to motors on the top and bottom. And the motors would spin independently, like effectively kind of twisting the disc.
So the discs, like, how they're mounted on, like, elastic or something?
Yeah, like kind of like a belt type of acrylic belt.
Yeah, right.
But we had to figure that out. At first, I thought it would be a wire, you know, just attaching a wire.
Yeah.
So yeah, this kind of illustrates the idea that I did in Cinema 4D. So after they said we loved the idea and I showed them that animation, they were like, okay, you know, let's make it happen. So my first goal was to figure out how to make this, just this one thing.
Right.
You know, if you could do this, then you could repeat it 30 times and make an entire backdrop.
Yeah.
So I made this animation and I approached different carpenters, engineers, people who welded, and asked them, is this something you could design? You know, could you put a motor on top and bottom and attach like discs where one side of the disc would be a mirror and the other side of the disc would be like a projection material or like a matte white paint.
Oh, okay, right, cool.
Yeah, and nice. I ended up finding a guy named William in Atlanta who was exactly the person that I was looking for. You know, kind of like a do-it-yourself, had a little workshop, you know, in the back of a venue where he got to do some carpentry work, and he knew how to, you know, do light design, and he knew a little bit of welding, a little bit of electrician work. He was kind of like a handyman, a creative handyman. And I sent him this idea of, you know, just this very, very, very simple idea. And he said, yep, that's something I could do. I could design. And when he said that, I said, okay, cool. Well, let's at least make one. Let's make one prototype. And so let me just take you to this prototype. So this was the very first prototype that he made that kind of that proved that it was possible to do. You know, you could project on one side and you could have mirrors on the other.
So this is footage of a physical object?
Yeah, this was footage.
Because this looks totally rendered.
Yeah, this is actual footage that he recorded in his studio in Atlanta of the actual object rotating. And once, you know, then he was kind of showing me different ways that he attached the wire to the motor box.
Right.
And then, you know, we kind of, him and I together had to figure out how to make the box soundproof. You know, how to design, like literally how to design the discs and how would the discs attach to this type of thing? Would we use wire? At first we used wire, but we realized that the rotation of the discs was unpredictable. Right. So then we kind of graduated to using like this acrylic belt, and maybe I'll just kind of take you through. Yeah, I mean, literally every step of the way, like there's different ways that we had to figure out how to soundproof it. He had a recording meter, and he was recording like the decibel of each one, so we could figure out how loud it would be, because these motors, you know, they make a decent amount of noise. So you'd have to figure, if you have 60 of them, is it going to be too distracting for the audience? Right. You know, so we had to do different ways of soundproofing it and putting this different types of like application inside of the boxes. Went through every step of the way, and we ended up getting to a point where we designed the motor box the way we wanted to. The discs would spin the way we wanted to. The response was nice. The way the rotation looked was good. And after the prototypes were done, that's when I presented the ideas to the client and said, okay, we're ready to go into production. Cool. And they were super excited, and that's kind of like, okay, so now the prototype's finished. We know how to make the one, so now let's just, you know, in 1 month's time, make 30 of them. Wow. You know, and figure out how to attach it to a big truss. And then it was a really rewarding process, but it took so many different types of engineering ideas, things that I never thought that I would have to ever learn. Like just the disc design alone, I went through 6 different ideas of how these wires would attach to these discs. Right. You know, things that I never thought that I would actually have to learn to do. You know. But after, you know, but it was rewarding, because then we really figured out the best way, the best approach, I guess. And it turned into a real show. I mean, here's, I think, 1 second. This was, yeah, okay. So this was at rehearsal, and when the band was practicing for the premiere show, and so we were in like a rehearsal studio for a week after we built them, and just trying different ideas of like how to utilize the discs. Yeah, and here's when we were building it.
It's also awesome how, you know, when you see this stuff in use on stage, it looks like such a thing that would come out of, I don't know, like a car manufacturing plant. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's so finished. You know what I mean? And then when you realize that it's like done in a very, very thoughtful and very like worked through way, but still kind of in a like DIY kind of mindset, that's so impressive to me.
Yeah, and it's really, looking back, you know, once you actually see the show built and on stage, and you see the way the band interacts with it and the way the audience responds to it, you know, it's hard not to have a flashback of like the 2 or 3 months that it took to actually, you know, like thinking of the original animation that I did, you know, with the idea, and then how many days and weeks and months every single day on Skype talking to somebody from Atlanta, you know, about like attaching discs to acrylic belt, you know, like that was like a huge part of my life for like 3 weeks. You know, it's just like something as funny as that. But the reward is definitely when you actually can see it alive. You know, sometimes a few tears can come out of your eyes when you're like, oh my God, it's a real thing.
Beautiful stuff. It's nice, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, he's pretty good at what he does, right? Yeah. So cool. We have about 10 minutes to go.
Okay.
Do you want to take us through another couple of projects, maybe?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, cool. It's just really cool to also see how differently you approach every single project that you do, because I really feel like it almost feels like you start from scratch. I mean, you have these things that you always incorporate. You work in 3D software, actually 4D software. There's always the element of video in your work. There's always that kind of stuff. But still, it's pretty fresh stuff that comes out every time.
Yeah. I think it's a kind of an interesting approach. It's a bit unorthodox. I think the way I approach it. I'm not a production company. I'm not. I'm a person in the studio, and my background is visual art and music making. So
you're definitely not a technician. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I talk to artists as an artist. And I think that's kind of why the connections kind of happen really organically and naturally, is because we talk as if we're just artists talking about inspiration, and that opens up the doorway of allowing just like the creative ideas to kind of flow, which is really important. I need that, I need to be able to connect with an artist on creative places and then go abstract and then go weird. It's like these type of things really open up those doorways. So I did a show for Hiatus Coyote. Does anyone here know Hiatus Coyote? Yeah, Napalm. She's an incredible singer. I met her back in 2012 when I was doing a tour with Flylo in Melbourne, and her and I hit it off like that, just like kindred spirits. And a few years ago, the Sydney Opera House invited me out there for a festival called Vivid. They wanted me to do a collaboration with Hiatus Coyote. They were going to do their first premiere show ever at the Sydney Opera House,
wow.
Which it's for them. It was like a huge honor. That's like the iconic landmark venue for any Australian, right? So
totally.
To play at the Sydney Opera House,
it's got to be like the most famous building in the world, or something like that.
Yeah, one of the most iconic, right? So for them, it was totally unreal.
Yeah.
And it was great. Vivid gave me a decent budget to design something creative, specifically bespoke for them. And so I was talking with Nay and I was talking with the band, and from one of the conversations we had, I started having these memories of seeing these rock formations, like these coastal rock formations that I think they're in England. It's these really strange looking rock formations. So I went online and I did some research, and it's called basalt rock formations. Do you guys know this? I think it's we've all seen this. But thinking about this type of stuff was really interesting, because I was thinking to myself, wow, is there a way of taking that type of idea and making a show that's inspired from these types of really bizarre looking rock formations, So as I was talking to them, I was kind of going through these different pictures and feeling super inspired. So I made a few different concept stage designs in Cinema 4D that kind of had these hexagonal stages, offset heights with the band, and then kind of putting these a laser array around all of them. And they really loved the idea. They thought that it would be really special to have. And so this was one of the shows that kind of got me a little bit in trouble, because they really loved and was like, okay, cool, this is great, let's make it happen. And when I actually started pricing this out, it was literally 10 times larger than the budget they gave me. And when I started figuring that out, I was kind of a little bit scared, oh my God, is this going to be able to, can we make this now? So I kind of had to pull back some of the inspiration, trying to preserve this idea, but make it within the confines of the budget that they were able to give me.
Right.
So this idea ended up turning into this stage design, which I really ended up falling in love with anyways, and so did the band. Instead of using lasers, we used a special type of light product, called I think it was called the AR10, forget, but it was by the company AR10.
Right. Yeah, they do a lot of stuff like this. Yeah. They have some really cool products.
Yeah, really amazing stuff where the actual LED batten will you can program the movement forward and back. So that was like the perfect thing. I was trying to find something that would still produce these kind of like these volumetric light patterns.
Yeah.
And I tested out the product, and I knew it was exactly the thing that I wanted to use. So I redesigned the stage in 3D using this light product, and I designed the light product to be as accurate, to real world accurate as possible. And so this ended up being the concept idea, using low-laying fog around them, so they're kind of like on an island, putting some par cans, throughout the stage, lighting it up, so it was almost like lights, it almost looked like lightning inside clouds, because you couldn't see you couldn't see the actual lights, but you could do these really interesting type of patterns around them, or you could put the lights, you could change like the way the light patterns move. You could add emphasis to Nay when she was singing. I could put lights just in the very center. It was really cool. The idea seemed to be the one that we would go for. So and it worked in the budget. And then we ended up taking it to the Sydney Opera House. So this was about 2 months later after I did that concept animation, when we premiered the show. And yeah, this is what it looked like.
Nice.
Yeah, really, really an exciting show.
It's cool because there's something really operatic about it.
Yeah, especially the way that, the light programming, the way you could kind of utilize the light programming was really interesting to add focus to the different artists when there was a drum solo, or when there was something to add emphasis to what they were already doing was really fun. And that was one of the things that I wanted to do with Hiatus Cody and the band. I didn't want to design a stage that kind of detracted from what they already did. I don't know if anyone's seen them perform, but they're incredible performers. Right. Pure musicianship. And what I wanted to do was just kind of expand on what they were already doing. Make a stage that just kind of complemented their performance and not kind of take away too much. I didn't want to detract from their performing, and it didn't. I think it was the perfect balance. It was just enough interesting lighting and just enough to add and not too much to take away. And that was kind of one of my goals for that show. But yeah, it ended up being a really fun one. There's talks of being able to actually take this on the road at the end of the year. Right, cool. So hopefully, maybe they'll travel through Europe, and we can take this on the road finally after 2 years.
That'd be great. I would love to see it in real life.
Yeah, it would be great to show it off. It's weird. We only did this show once. It was literally months and months of preparation to only do it once. And sometimes this is how it works. Yeah. But it would be nice to be able to give it some love.
Totally.
And show more of the world this really great show that we ended up making for.
We got about a minute left to go.
Okay.
So I just want to open up for any questions or comments from the house.
Yeah, I'm just curious to know, because it's really cool to see what happens if you put a budget on art and not on a production company necessarily. But for people who are starting out or who are independent or don't have any budget, do you have any advice or tips for people who really don't have any budget at all but still would want to be creative with their visual design or lighting design?
You mean like the artist who wants the show without a budget? Is that what you mean?
No, maybe if you're independent or if you're starting out but you want to do something creative, or maybe when you were starting out, what was your process to really break out of the box but without a budget?
Yeah, it's interesting. It doesn't have to be really expensive. There's a company in LA that I work with a lot that does different types of they sew different types of materials, like screens or different materials. Getting to know these people and working with them was really helpful, because I found out that if you go directly to the source, you want to buy a screen material, or if you want a screen cut and then sewed to a specific shape, it's really not that expensive. In LA was $100 to make a screen, a custom screen. So I would say, going to the source, making a relationship with a fabric manufacturer, going to the actual places that produce these objects, you'll be surprised how much bang you can get for your buck. Nowadays projectors are super cheap, so you can do a lot of testing at home with a $200 projector in your, or, $100 projector. The price of everything has really gone down. It's crazy. It's really crazy. You can buy LED sticks from China for 12 of them for a couple $100. I think with technology and globalization, it's opened up the door to being able to find whatever you want at really like cost-effective places. So I would say if you wanted to kind of get into doing some design work, what helped me a lot was designing everything to scale in Cinema 4D. Like literally making the stage to the specifications of where you would be performing. Everything to scale, so it's 100% crystal clear what you need to make. Like what size screen you need to make, or what size objects you need to design. So I would, did you do any work in animation, or do you do any like design work in 3D?
Not in 3D. No.
In 3D?
No.
Cinema 4D is, does anyone here use Cinema 4D? Does anyone have any of that a little bit? It's one of the easiest programs to make 3D designs. It's crazy how fast you can actually design things. And you can design everything to scale, if you use, feet or meters. It's really, really easy to learn, really friendly, tutorials online. I mean, that's how I learned how to do Cinema 4D, was just like diving deep into tutorials, YouTube tutorials, going through the Cinema 4D PDF manual, So that was my technique. It was learning how to design it in 3D first, and then finding the actual places that produce these things, like the production companies, or not the production companies, but like the fabric shops, going to the source. So, yeah. That's my screensaver. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think we have to cut it short.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Cool.
Yeah.